Okay, so anybody knows me knows I really fucking love this business. I love the people, that's you lot. I love agencies and all their very many weird and wonderful ways that they come to life, and I love the product that we make and the way that in which it's changing. But there's one thing that makes me hang my head in eternal and mortal shame, and that is the way that we continue to think about and talk about audiences. To misquote one of Hugh MacLeod's more famous cartoons, if you talked about people the way that advertising talks about people, they'd fucking punch you in the face. I've got a lovely example. I found this yesterday. It's absolutely brilliant. So in quotes. Now, in case you've forgotten, quotation marks are there to represent the real words of somebody who actually exists, not to pretend that somebody said something, which is what this does. I'm a busy but organised mum! Exclamation mark. I take great pride in keeping my family happy and my house looking pristine. But, in caps, I'm not one of those quotation marks, tracksuit mums quotation marks. I still care a lot about my looks, and I always look my best. This is a real example from a real media agency for a real client about a completely fictitious audience. And it's not like this is anything particularly new. It's over 30 years since David Ogilvy, in his characteristically sexist manner, pointed out that the consumer... I mean, come on, he's a legend, but not exactly enlightened. The consumer is not a moron, she is your wife. And although he was talking about creative work, I think, for me the rot starts with the brief and the briefing process. So I'm going to do 6 notes to selves. I've used this before, I know some of you have seen that, just to kind of think about some stuff we might contend with when we're briefing and writing creative briefs. Now, I admit this isn't particularly a modern approach. We should have sort of sorted this shit out years ago. This is not about modernity, this is about humanity. But I think the seismic changes that are taking place in people's lives and in our industry, and I think also critically our need to halt the rise of sciencey marketing means that this is incredibly appropriate time to address this. My first then is, let's once and for all kill the caricature. You know what I'm talking about, the sort of pony pen portraits, one of which I've just described, or the awful segmentation studies. I just asked some people, give me some fantastic segment. Value conscious Val. Who the fuck is value conscious Val? I saw something yesterday, somebody was described, a group of people described as the I want it alls. That isn't even English. And I was at a conversation, some BBC radio people the other day, and they were talking at each other about how their replenishers were different to somebody else's replenishers. I don't know what a replenisher is. And you know the way that because we learnt this shit when we were young, didn't we? We can write these pens, you can write them up, you go, oh, Ben and Samantha are 27. They live in Hendon with their dog and young family. On the weekends, they like to go to swingers parties and are really into BDSM. It's time to kill the caricature and the disrespectful way in which we talk to people. We need to bring to life real people, real lives and real stories. I think it's far better in a brief to have just like a description of somebody you've actually met in the real world than any number of fetid sort of outpourings of a client's insight department. That's being generous to us. If we're not being generous to us, it's our fault. Second, while, quite frankly, although I notice that the flies are still in the urinals at the IPA as a sort of, testament to the era of behavioural economics, the kind of heat has died down around behavioural economics. But I think what it's left us with is a profound sense that we're here to change behaviour, not to change attitudes in the first and foremost. We need to stop all of that shit about what do people think about this brand, what do we want them to think about this brand, and articulate substantively in the brief what it is, the substantial behaviour change we want people to undertake in order to meet our commercial or social objectives. That becomes desperately important. And that has to be a proper real life outcome, not, play our stupid game or like us on Facebook. Thirdly, Michael's talking a little bit about insight. I think we'll probably agree at some point in this journey, insight is kind of important. It's one of the things we do. I think we can probably agree that if you just gather together all of the creative briefs and client presentations and decks you've got, they would be woefully inadequate in the insight department. I have a stamp which I use quite often actually, which tells me or anybody else reading it that a document is guaranteed free of insight. It's wonderful to, particularly when you get a client brief in, it kind of allows you to vent some of that frustration and anger. That's why, I know I bang on about this, but that's why I like the word revelation. If you put on a brief, what is the fucking revelation? It slightly acts as an action standard that gets something better out of people, yeah? There's a lovely little story when we did the Yaris campaign, the Smart Money's on Yaris, where somebody said, it's called small driver syndrome, that somebody said, I really fucking hate the way that drivers of larger cars look down on me. And you can go, okay, that's maybe something that I can work with. So let's start delivering revelations. This is Howard Gossage. I fucking love him. This is him in his own ad, as you do, trying to popularise seatbelts in the 1960s. On the basis, why not, that seatbelts make you look like a First World War fighter pilot. Good luck with that, Howard. But he's also, as you know, the bloke that said, sometimes, people read what interests them and sometimes it's an ad. And I think we need to get better at articulating what it is really interests people, rather than describing the way that we think that they might be interested in our brand or product. And I'm talking about, more fully exploring the media that they use and love, the technology they use and love, and the content they use and love, and the way that it fits into their lives. A really fantastic planner I talked to recently said that she discovered that night feeding mums and dads were using Google Hangouts as a way of reducing the isolation and loneliness of night feeds. I thought, that's a fucking brilliant revelation, possibly, about the way a piece of technology works for people. And I think probably if we can get this bit right, it's the single most helpful thing we could do in briefs and briefing in order to open up if we can't always or often know what we want to make out of this process, this is the single most helpful thing at opening up what the possibilities might be. Question of influence. I think we just need to get better at discussing and describing the communities of interest that people have, who influence them, who they influence. We kind of learnt it a little bit with Great Schlepp, because that was the scales falling from our eyes about how to talk to one group of people to get them to talk to others. We really need now to be engaging properly. I think things like the Brooklyn Brothers inspired by Iceland campaign is a really good example of figuring out the chains of influence, and whether that is us and that's the audience, or that's the audience and that's the audience as well. Finally, that's scary, isn't it, when you're in front of your 15-inch MacBook, a large picture of Steve Henry doesn't look too bad, but on this stage it looks fucking scary to me. He's my old boss, and all he ever said, he said two things I want from planners. I want you to tell me stuff I don't know about people, and secondly he said, please could you talk about the audience in ways that makes me love and respect them. He also hated the word, which you still find banded about the place, when people talk about punters, they're real people, and he wanted to be able to love and respect them. And of course that reminds me that ultimately, the process of brief writing and briefing is really an empathetic endeavour. This is Roman Krasnick's little book on empathy. That's sadly the way, isn't it? There's only a little book to be written on empathy. I really advocate you read it, because it's about describing really what we do deep down is we try and build simple human connections between people. So all of this, and I've got 1 minute and 2 seconds left to describe to you that this has sort of made me change the habit of a lifetime. I was a real advocate of what I called the naked brief, that people should write the brief that they wanted to write. And I really hated the idea of briefing formats, partly because it seemed to me that writing briefing formats was the thing that heads of planning did when they didn't have anything else to do, and to show that they were making a difference. I had this naked brief idea, and I've started to change my mind about this, because I think maybe we're at the point where we need to legislate a little bit for how we want things to unfold, rather than just hoping that talented people faced with a blank piece of paper will be able to pull it off. So I've been experimenting with different ways of doing this, and I share this with you not because I think it's brilliant or amazing or that it's best practice or you should go away and do it. It's just kind of how we're trying to feel our way forward. This next chart is a picture of a creative brief. Yes, there we go. So it's kind of 2 pages. Yes, a brief should be 1 page. It's 2 pages. The first bit's in the back, and that's the bit that still focuses stuff. In fact, we call the proposition now the focus. So it kind of loosens it up a little bit, but it does give creative teams somewhere to start. And we talk about things like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the behaviour change that's required? What is the revelation? It's kind of, your pretty normal creative brief. But then what we're trying to do is to open up all of this stuff around, what do the audience really, really love? What connections do they have? Where are they? What are they doing there? What role does it play in their lives? What are the communities that they're involved in, and how do they influence, and how are they influenced? And what's the chatter around the brand? It's just our attempt to try and legislate for different sorts of outcomes so that we can continue to create work that engages and delights people and gets our job done. This final slide is deeply embarrassing. It's the sort of thing that you kind of put into your presentation and feel very pleased about and send it off to the IPA and go, why the fuck did I put that in? It makes no sense. I'm trying to make a really ham-fisted point about technology and humanity, and that while we explore how delightful and wonderful technology is and the difference it's making to our audience's lives, can we please remember the humanity bit? I mean, right at the beginning, Paul talks about lots of businesses say, oh, well, we're not in logistics any longer, we're in technology. We're not in entertainment any longer, we're in technology. We are not in the technology business, we are in the humanity business. And if we remember that, that will make the greatest difference to the way that we treat our audiences. Thank you.